So the first growth goal that I had was element 15, which was previewing information. Not only was this one of the lower scoring elements when my students did their pre-survey, it was also something I chose knowing that going into testing season that we're in the middle of right now, that this would be a good strategy to apply when reviewing information, when looking at data and deciding what benchmarks would make the most sense for us to be spending time on. And by previewing information with the students and finding out what they already know and telling them we're previewing that information and hearing feedback back from them of what they already know really helped know where to start in the review process with the benchmarks. And that would be for math and science, and ELA as well. I did use the word previewing with them. I wanted them to know this is something that I'm specifically doing, not just talking about benchmarks, but let's look and see not only what you know, but what lays ahead with those different benchmarks so that they are aware of where we're going with what we're going with. And it gives them more ownership of their learning, because not only are they getting a chance, an opportunity to share what they already know about the content, they can see the progression of where we're going to go with it. And I think that really helps students know when they know the overall outcome. And one thing we did with the instructional slides that are used by our district was I would always show them the pacing, or I started showing them the pacing as part of the previewing, so they could see how many days. They could see with math the progression of the benchmarks as we go from ALD 2s up to ALD 5s. They could see how much time was spent with each, and it just gave them a good overall view of where we were going when we were still finishing up our modules at the end, before we started test review and test prep specifically, as we were finishing up our core content. So previewing was good as for finishing up our core content, and it's something I know next year going in that I will want to do specifically across all subject areas. Every time we start a new topic or module, show them the pacing, show them the progression of the standards, so that they feel that they know where they are in the process as we're going, not just listening, this is what we're doing today. They know what we did yesterday. They know why we're doing what we're doing today leading into tomorrow, just to give them an idea of the big picture and timing. And I think that was something that my students really appreciated, was knowing, okay, this topic is 6 days. Okay, this topic is 3 days. This topic is 10 days. It gave them a good sense of knowing how long we were going to spend. And as we were going through the material, if they weren't grasping it right away, they knew, oh, that's okay, because this is a 10-day module. We're only on day 2. So it gave them a good sense of that end goal and how much time they had by previewing the content with them as well. My second element that we worked on was using academic games. And this was one that, of course, the students loved. It's very engaging to use games. In my pre-survey, the students had scored overall on neither agreeing or disagreeing. So it was definitely something that they would not say, we never have ever done a game. But it also shows that it is not something that they're like, yeah, we do use games a lot. So this was a fun one to incorporate in our core time and going into test review. This had the highest change in the mean. There was over 7 points increase from the pre to post survey average. I think for several reasons. This is engaging for the students. The previous element, the previewing, while it was beneficial for them and they are glad that we did it, it's not as much fun. Using academic games is fun. It's exciting. And I was happy that the students seemed to have good sportsmanship with the games. In previous years, sometimes you have classes that the sportsmanship is just a struggle. Some students do not understand that we're playing a game for fun to help us learn for fun and make learning more engaging. But my class this year seemed to have a good handle on the end game is for them to learn more and learn better and be more interested in the learning, because it is a game. One of the first games that we did was it was the beginning of March when I had just finished these pre-surveys, and it had come to my attention that a teacher in previous years, one of the students mentioned a March Madness. So I said, what a perfect way to have a solid game that goes over a span of time. We spent the whole month on it. It was our warm-up activity for math. And I looked at data and looked at high success benchmarks and decided to do multiplication and division of larger numbers as what we did for that March Madness every day. And we made the brackets and everything like that, and they could see when they were going to go. And long division and multiplication with larger numbers for my students, I have a higher class, to me is a benchmark that they are totally capable, for the most part, of having procedural reliability with, and should be a skill that they leave fifth grade having, and are able to grasp. But I saw that students, while they knew what to do with the steps, they were making mistakes. And when we would review it, they saw their mistakes and error, but they were so simple. Oftentimes, just when they would regroup, they added incorrectly. A number such as like 3 plus 3, someone would put 5. Like, they just weren't paying attention to those little details. And it could be because they were caught up in the steps and the organization. And, that is something we had focused on, the organization of multiplying and dividing those larger numbers on paper. But it was something that, because I know they knew the steps, they knew how to set the problems up, they could tell somebody how to solve the problems, but they were still making those little mistakes, that this would definitely be an area to just really hone in on and give the students incentive to just get better at those little details. And that's what really got students in or out when we did our March Madness, that little mistake. So they became more aware of that. And while the students who were competing would be at the front of the room on the board doing the problems, every student sitting down was also required to be solving at their desk. So every single day, students were practicing multiplying and dividing. We had one multiplication problem, one long division problem with larger numbers. The students who were competing were, competing, and the students at their desks were working on their desk on the same problem, with the thought that my turn's coming up, I want to practice this. So it really incentivized for the other students who weren't necessarily in the competition at that day to know that this is something I want to get better at, because it will be my turn, and if I'm already out, it's because I need to practice this. And if I'm still in the game or my turn is coming up, I want to be the best I can when I go up for my turn. So I really saw that incentive of, I'm not just going to do this to go through the steps. I want to know how to do this. So that was definitely a fun way to include academic games. Also, I just really brainstormed, besides having something that was so organized as this and, required a lot of planning, and we did every day, just in our daily routine as we moved into review units, even just little ways to make something fun or give a prize without making, a huge plan. So I started having the students put their exit tickets for science when we started our science review. They work collaboratively, and we would go over those responses, and then they would use their exit ticket instead of just exit ticket, and I collect them and sort them through. I would pull the top 2 answer. Like, I would go into the container, and if it was correct, the first 2 correct answers would just get a prize from the prize box. And that really just gave them more of an incentive to focus during the lesson when they were working collaboratively, and when I reviewed, for them to pay good attention and work hard, because then when their exit ticket came up, they had a chance to win a small prize. And just that small prize, I saw, really just, made the work seem less like drudgery, and yes, we're reviewing, and more like, oh, I have an opportunity to get rewarded for my hard work. And it encouraged them too, when they were working collaboratively, to really make use of that time and make sure they were paying attention, because they had an opportunity independently to get a small prize. We also organized a grade level science review, where students from each class had students divided into 6 different houses. In the past, we've looked at Harry Potter, but this time we decided to go with video games, because that's what the kids are doing nowadays. So we're still actually in the midst of that, but every class is divided into 6 different games. And we made a spreadsheet where the teachers report out the winning team for each of the review quizzes that we're doing for our science review boot camp leading up to the science test. So that has been a fun way to look at a game in a different way, instead of just class by class or class versus class. I really like it because each class is working with the students from other classes as a team. So it's not just class versus class, which really would not work the way our classes are organized, because again, I have a higher class. This way, everything is evened out for the students at their different levels. And the students talk about, which game they're in. And it makes a nice feel for the grade level for the students, to kind of bond with the students from other classes that are still on their team. And that's going to culminate in a pizza party during lunchtime for the winning game team. So they're looking forward to that. And they actually have had a good spirit of fun with that too. Some students have gotten rather competitive with that because they all want the pizza party. But again, I'm seeing really good results in the review of content because they're really putting in their effort. They really want to be the winning team that day. So that has been a great opportunity to have another longer review. So going forward, I think it's nice to have organized longer games like the March Madness and our science boot camp, but then just daily, even if it's to just have a small prize, a small treat, or just a small simple game, just at that moment has been nice for the students as well. And I think this also scored the highest difference in the mean or the most area of growth because it's a very definitive element. You're playing games or you're not. For the students, it's very easy for them to say, yes, we do, or no, we haven't. We're previewing, even though I use the terminology, again, it's not as fun. It's not as engaging, even though it's important. And sometimes, even though I'm using the word, they might not really realize what we're doing is previewing all the time. For games are more memorable for them. The last element that I worked on was element 31, providing opportunities for students to talk about themselves. This was something that was a little harder for me to incorporate, to be honest. Following curriculum as curriculum is laid out, and as someone who does stick with our district curriculum, it's not really something that unfortunately is embedded so much into the daily curriculum. One thing I did try to focus on more was an ELA, making that text connection to self and verbalizing that, this will connect to text. Now we're going to connect text to self, giving them just a little opportunity to relate to the text of their personal experiences. And that's something to realize going forward is an opportunity, especially in reading and reading texts. That would be a great opportunity for students to talk about themselves. I did have an organized assignment for them to do a personal narrative. We were moving into narrative writing for quarter 4. And I thought, well, if they're going to write a narrative, let it be personal, something that gives them an opportunity to talk about themselves. Besides the early beginning of year opportunities for students to, do the all about me type things, we really, even though we have morning meetings or we try to have morning meetings, by the time, attendance is taken and the late bell rings, the reality is, they're very brief if they're fit in. So that's something to think of too going into next year. Just having those morning meetings, even if it's just one student sharing, and going through a rotation, or just turning and talking to somebody else about themselves. It doesn't always have to be to the teacher, would be something to really focus on. One of the projects the students had to do was to research that was from our curriculum was for students to choose a research project on a holiday as the research aspect. So I altered it a little bit and had them research their favorite holiday instead of assigning the holiday that the curriculum wanted them to research, which was a national holiday, or I think it was maybe the 4th of July, because we've been reading about the Bill of Rights and the founding of the country. So I believe that was the assignment in the curriculum. I said, well, why can't they research their favorite holiday? And that'll give them an opportunity to share something about themselves. So I was able to alter that a little bit, and I explained to them why we were doing it a little bit different, because I wanted them to have an opportunity to share something about themselves. So they enjoyed that. And especially the students who come from, their families come from other countries and cultures. I told them if it's something that they celebrate with their family, that they can certainly research that. So they had a really good time researching a holiday that they celebrate, and maybe a few other students in the class do celebrate, but not the majority or not everybody. So they enjoyed having that opportunity to research and write about something that was really important to them, and that they know everybody might not know about. So those were 2 examples of specific projects that we did give an opportunity for students to talk a little bit more about themselves, and that was something I know they enjoyed, and going forward, something to remember, going past the first week or 2 of school, just to try to get those little opportunities, whether it's through morning meeting time. They can talk to each other. It doesn't always have to be, them talking to the teacher, but just making things relatable to what they like is really important because then they have more buy-in. And if they have more buy-in, they're learning more. And that's the end game, is the students to be learning and enjoying learning and to be making gains on those benchmarks. So those were the 3 areas that I addressed in my growth goals. And I'm going to make a very, very valiant effort to make sure next year, going into the school year, that I remember these 3 elements, and to also review the other 40 elements and see, what other areas that I know are automatic, that are just part of how I, approach teaching in the classroom, and other, lower scoring areas to, just have a visual list maybe up of what to remember to incorporate. That's important. That might be outside the direct curriculum, but that the students will benefit from.